Due to the highly sensitive nature of the program you are about to see, it was necessary to change the physical appearance and names of some of the participants. Discover what the KGB found in an Egyptian tomb.
The objective of this particular mission was to find the knowledge which was left behind from an advanced culture.
I was one of the first to be recruited by the KGB.
I don't believe the soldiers realized the significance of what they were looking at.
Got orders, you have to do it.
The first hard evidence of an humanoid extraterrestrial life form.
Extraterrestrial contact at a distant time in an ancient land.
Remember, nobody knows my name.
Exclusive film footage of what could be the discovery of the millennium. Learn the terrible secret before it's too late.
Hello, I'm Roger Moore. In 1961, Soviet cosmonaut Andrei Andropov lifted off in a Soyuz space capsule and spent 45 minutes in orbit. For decades, we have believed that the first human beings in space were Russian. Is it possible, though, that centuries earlier, the first people to leave the Earth were ancient Egyptians? And did Soviet researchers learn this early in the 1960s? Recent evidence out of the former USSR indicates that indeed Russian agents were very curious about artifacts uncovered in Egypt. Artifacts which they believe suggest early contact between humans and beings not from this planet.
It's always been assumed the hunting ground for extraterrestrial life is above our planet. You watch the skies for UFOs. You probe the domain of deep space for the telltale signals of ET. Who would have thought to look underground for aliens? No one, except the KGB. Dr. Viktor Ivanovich holds degrees in astrophysics and neurology. While serving in the Kremlin as science advisor on advanced propulsion systems, Dr. Ivanovich contends he gained access to the files of a KGB mission called Project ISIS.
Project ISIS, it was targeted at discovering Egyptian artifacts and knowledge that may have military applications. ISIS was one of the several covert research missions that KGB was conducting during that time.
Dr. Ivanovich chronicles the mission and its shocking discovery in his book, Project ISIS, the KGB's discovery of the Tomb of the Visitor. This exclusive footage has never before been seen outside the top secret facilities of the KGB. According to Ivanovich, what you are watching is a visual record of the most important discovery in the history of mankind.
There is no disputing the fact that a small group of Russian scientists, together with military experts on radioactivity and chemical warfare, discovered the tomb in Egypt in 1961. The record is clear on that point. But what was never disclosed was what they found inside the tomb. From the available evidence and highly placed sources, in the sarcophagus were the remains of an alien creature who died in Egypt about 10,000 years BC. The point I'm making in my book is that the presence of this creature and the design of the pyramids and the whole pool of historical and scientific evidence shows that this particular visitation took place about 11,000 years BC.
Long before the Babylonians or the Greeks, before the gods of the Assyrians or those of Crete, long before all others, there was Egypt. The world owes much to the ancient Egyptians. They were the first mathematicians, the first astronomers. They gave the world the principles of geometry, the use of symbols to convey numbers. The first calendar was Egyptian, as was the first writing paper. The world's first libraries were found buried under the sands of Egypt. This is why the disclosure of Project ISIS is so troubling. If the claims of Dr. Ivanovich are true, if the KGB did find an alien entombed in Egypt, it will force us to reconsider the history of civilization. Each year, hundreds of archaeological expeditions come to Egypt. They could be analyzing antiquities that have long been studied, searching for new clues that may disprove old theories, or struggling to reconstruct the life of a slave village from fragments of the past.
We are currently excavating a site in what is known as the New Kingdom, on the slave route to the Valley of the Kings. And the question there is, how did the ancient Egyptians feed and care for the hundreds, perhaps thousands of slaves that they needed to create these massive, massive structures? The fundamental question of ancient Egypt is, how did such a civilization, so incredibly advanced, spring forth, fully formed, around 2500 BC? If you look back at any other ancient civilization, what you find is a gradual historical development, meaning they learned about trade, they created economies, they became technologically advanced slowly, hundreds and hundreds, perhaps thousands of years. You get none of that with ancient Egypt. 2500 BC, boom, fully formed society pops out of the desert. It's like a Model T Ford, an ancient automobile, 1 minute, and the next minute the craft is a space shuttle. The question, the fundamental question here, is that there seems to be no gradual historical development to explain the building of ancient Egypt. It seems to have formed from a legacy.
Some have speculated that Egypt was built from the remnants of a lost civilization that perished in the biblical flood. Dr. Ivanovich contends Project ISIS discredited this theory. According to Ivanovich, the KGB uncovered evidence that proves Egypt was founded on a heritage of wisdom from an extraterrestrial race. Coming up next, exclusive film footage of the most amazing discovery of the millennium.
I don't believe the soldiers realized the significance of what they were looking at. The first hard evidence of an humanoid extraterrestrial life form.
When we return right after this. The austere building behind me once housed what was undoubtedly the world's largest and most feared intelligence agency. Why would the KGB be so interested in what many consider to be science fiction?
The genesis of Project ISIS began in the post-war period of the 50s. From the bloody ashes of World War II, a new Soviet state had emerged. No longer was Russia a backward agrarian nation. The motherland was a superpower and willing to prove it. Under the dictatorship of Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviets were determined to show the democracies of the West that communism was superior. It was a challenge America could not ignore.
The competition between the two superpowers was an immense drain on Soviet economy. Placing the man in space before the Americans was a great propaganda feat, but it cost billions in bills. The same for the arms buildup. Each time America tested the nuclear bomb, Russia had to respond with a bigger one, again costing the Soviet government billions.
As the world watched and prayed, the two nations joined in a Cold War for technological supremacy.
Khrushchev knew that the so-called socialist camp headed by the Soviet Union could not keep up this pace. It did not have NATO's resources. That's when the KGB was ordered to investigate less costly means of technical advancement.
At the height of the Cold War, the KGB was the largest secret police and espionage force on the planet, with more than 300,000 agents. Under orders from the Kremlin, the KGB focused its considerable resources on areas that some would call fringe science. The KGB investigated the power of psychics. Experiments were conducted to test the feasibility of gathering intelligence through mind control. A man with a taste for blood headed the paranormal division of the KGB.
The KGB research into the anomalous phenomena had begun in the 1920s, when a special laboratory, so-called dark room, was created. From the middle 1930s, Russian psychics had been persecuted under Stalinist regime. Gleb Boki, who was in charge of the paranormal phenomena for the KGB, was a sinister and cruel person who was known to drink human blood. The KGB had conducted psychotronic weapons research on prisoners that were sentenced to die, and also political dissidents. When Gleb Boki and people who had studied the anomalous phenomena with him in the KGB were executed in 1937, all of the files were transferred, as far as we know, to the most secret archives of the KGB. However, the paranormal research went on. Under Khrushchev, great successes had been achieved in the Soviet Union with the paranormal. Some of the first biogenerators and machines to alter human minds came to the scene. The Americans were worried about Soviet research programs because they knew that the Soviet Union would not use it for peaceful means.